everybody. Welcome to the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. We are back, baby. We're doing great episodes. I'm bringing you the best hits I can, the best guests, and trying to give you guys tactical, actionable advice. I'm one of these guys who hates when it's all 20,000 feet up and figure it out yourself. We want to make sure you're walking away with 2-3 tips from every show. That could be on marketing, business development, time management, health and wellness, whatever it is that's going to help you live your best lawyer's life. That's what was going on here. Today is no different. I've got one of my good buddies, Chris, in the wings. How's it going, Chris?
Great, Steve. Great to be here.
You ready to rock and roll?
Yes, for sure.
You're going to bring your A game?
I hope with your
Okay,
help.
I'll stop with the interrogation. We're gonna have some fun. I know you and I, we go back a little bit, and we've just I think we've just kind of connected at such a level where we really appreciate and enjoy each other, and love to just share ideas. And I'm just happy to finally get you on the show. I've been begging you for years. No, I haven't, but I'm happy that you're here, and I know we're gonna have a really good time. So welcome, my friend.
Well, thanks. This is quite a compliment. I brought you in, as you know, about a year ago to speak to our attorneys here, and I continue to use the material and reinforce some of the things that you've taught our attorneys as well as me. So I'm work in
Wow.
progress. So again, it's a compliment to be on a podcast with you, Steve.
Yeah. Well, it's always a great collaboration, and we're going to start off with our quote of the show, and this one is a Zig Ziglar, and this is one I've heard for many years, and I've always enjoyed that. I'm not sure it's been mentioned on the show, so I'm excited to share it with everybody. These are the kind of gems that you want to hear it twice, but you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. I'm going to just read that one more time. You can have everything in life that you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. Zig Ziglar is awesome, man. So tell us why that quote. Why is that near and dear to your heart?
I almost 40 years ago, my first career was with Anheuser-Busch, and the theme was making friends was our business. And that's a motto I still hold true today. It's really just making friends, building relationships. Although it seems obvious, it's worked for me throughout my career. So that's why I really like that quote.
Yeah, and Anheuser-Busch got me quite hungover. How about that business? In
You
college,
and me
holy
both.
mackerel. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah,
I made a lot of friends, but I also had some hangovers to share too.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I love that because I think we're all into us, right? We're all into it's me, it's me, it's my game, it's my life, it's my this, my that. And sometimes when we're so ego driven and me focused, we sometimes miss the idea that it is about client service. It is about helping others. It's about giving back. It's about doing things that are gonna it's like networking, right? I know we're gonna get into that today, but it's like if you're just a taker and you're just out there to take and sell people, you're going to find yourself very lonely very quickly, because all the books and that have been written on the subject, including Legal Business Development Isn't Rocket Science and the Attorney's Networking Handbook, available on Amazon, by the way, all say how important it is to be a giver. And so I think that quote just sort of encapsulates that.
yeah. I totally agree. And like I said, it's worked for me. I continues to work for my peers and others that I know. And it's not only brings you, it builds relationships. It makes you feel good that you're a
Yeah.
resource to people. That You're constantly giving, and it always comes back one way or another.
Yeah. Spot on. Spot on. So everybody, Chris Ruzicka is the Director of Business Development at Carmody McDonald, and you're in a unique role. Most lawyers have heard about that there are non-lawyers that work at law firms and that do business development at law firms, but I haven't had too many on the show, and so I think you're kind of a unicorn, which is important for you to come on the show and kind of share what you're doing and why it's beneficial to everybody. But give us a little bit of your background, Chris, so everyone knows how you came to be, obviously Anheuser-Busch being part of it.
Sure. I was in business development and marketing in Anheuser-Busch and also with Sara Lee, so big company, but then also now what is Cushman Wakefield. I ran their
Mhm.
corporate marketing and commercial real estate. So work with brokers both in the sales as well as a marketing and business development capacity. But really, I will tell you, Steve, I had 8 years ago, the company had been with went bankrupt, and I had two recruiters from two different law firms call me, and one quite a big law firm, and then our Carmody McDonald, which is a mid-sized firm, about 60 attorneys. And I kept thinking, I have two brothers that are attorneys, a sister-in-law attorney, but what would I do at a law firm? And they said, they liked the fact that I had a strong marketing background, but what they really wanted me to do is be out there when sometimes attorneys couldn't be, to be able to be the face of the firm, but also be able to coach our attorneys on both marketing and business development, bring in referrals, and then help provide education like I did bringing you in.
Yeah.
So it's been one of the best jobs I've had. People always ask me, gosh, you work at Anheuser-Busch, you work at Sara Lee, you worked at an innovation, and now you're working at a law firm. But I tell people it's one of the most rewarding and exciting jobs I've had, and by far the most measurable job. I can tell you every day of the week how many referrals I've brought in and the dollars. And so that's exciting for me.
And why do you think it is that law firms don't think to bring in someone that isn't a lawyer to network and develop business and bring in the work, and we rely solely on the rainmaker or having the attorneys do it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And a question I got when I came in, even from some of the attorneys that were interviewing us, especially attorneys who 40 years ago could not market their service, never had a business development person. So would question, why do we need someone like you when I was successful without it? But today, as you know, it's so much more competitive. You're seeing not only CPA firms, financial advisors, but more and more law firms. Actually yesterday, somebody approached me from another law firm asking if I'd be interested in coming to their firm. So it really is something, as you know, that they can provide these attorneys additional ammo, additional help, additional support to help not only recruit, but also to retain. So I know when they're recruiting attorneys, they constantly are talking up that we now have a business development person that's going to help coach you, help you meet people, and help bring in referrals.
Yeah. So it can be a game changer for firms that are more forward thinking. But what I really want to get into is you're obviously become very good at business development and networking, and I wanted to just have you share some of your experiences and some of your tips on how you do it effectively. I'm kind of a fan of talking about pain points first, right, and then solutions. So um, lawyers are notoriously bad at business development, and one of the main skills that they need to learn and as fast as possible is networking and how to build relationships. Why do you see, or I mean, not you're not going to talk about anybody specific, but you can think about attorneys that aren't good at networking. Why do you think that is?
I'll start by saying, especially in the legal industry, most attorneys I work with, and also attorneys I know outside the firm, don't want to be considered as being too salesy.
Sure.
There's nothing against personal injury attorneys. We need personal injury attorneys, but their fear is they want to be able to get the business through relationships.
Yeah.
And so there's always that concern that I come across too salesy. And so what I try to do is coach the attorneys. I push them, but I also make sure it's comfortable and it's how it works for them to be able to build relationships, be able to bring in business, and reinforce that even though they're working as an associate for a partner, it's not necessarily true that they're going to absorb all of those clients when that partner maybe retires. But also for some of our partners know that at first they thought, oh, it's great that we have a business development person for our younger attorneys. But then they start saying, two heads are better than one. And so they knew I could be brought in to help brainstorm on how to deal with a client or how to build a relationship with a client or how to get business.
Yeah. And what are the things that lawyers need to do to prepare to build business, to network, to go out there and actually start bringing in the dollars?
I think first and foremost is, and to your point, it comes naturally to them. Networking and building relationships is relatively easy, but not most. And so I think the most important thing is to be able to start first with people that they feel comfortable with. And so do a little practice like anything else. It takes practice. All of us, including you and I, had to practice before we continue to go out there and network. And so I always encourage our attorneys, start small, start maybe with a friend. Everybody went to law school at one point or another. So maybe they go with their a former law student that they went to school with, and then maybe ask them to bring a friend. So first and foremost, I say, first, start by practicing. And maybe I encourage them maybe to bring me. So I had one attorney one time. He was relatively young, and he and I met with an individual that I was connecting him with. And I will tell you, Steve, on the way to the meeting, he was perspiring all over. You could tell he was nervous. And so I calmed him down, talked about let's really first and foremost just build a relationship. Let's talk about the Cardinals game tomorrow, or what are they doing for vacation this summer. Don't necessarily have to talk about your value proposition, all the services we offer, where you went to law school. So my point is, start by practicing, maybe bring along somebody else, or start with somebody you feel comfortable with, and then leverage other people that do business development on a regular basis to help you.
Yeah. I would just add the importance of really identifying your targets. And that's a salesy word, but ultimately, if you're just going out and meeting people for no reason at all, you're going to find that it's just a time suck. So I think there's good ways to practice with your friends. That's a brilliant play, and try to do things in a safe environment with people you know. And then ultimately, you need to be directed to prospective clients and prospective strategic partners, people that would be considered referral partners. So if you're not writing a plan or having a plan to follow, it's like, hey, I want you to go from Chicago to Alaska, and here's a compass versus here's a very high-end GPS system and a really fun car to drive. Now go, right? You're going to find it a much more enjoyable trip when you have a little bit of a plan. Are there things that you suggest in planning to help attorneys be more efficient?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I always encourage all of our attorneys to build their center of influence, or I call it their entourage of CPAs, bankers, maybe other attorneys, financial advisors. Seldom I'll have some pushback from attorneys that I don't necessarily need a CPA myself, or I don't want to. I already have a financial advisor, but I tell them that, hey, but that's not the reason not to network with those people. Those people are out on a regular basis, and most everybody wants to get to those business owners and do work for businesses. Well, the best way to do that, because business owners are not out there networking most of the time. They're not available. They're working on day to day. So if you can build relationships with their trusted advisors, which could be other attorneys, could be CPAs, again, bankers, financial advisors, that's one tip. Two is be prepared before you go to that networking event. And so sometimes people are hesitant to use LinkedIn. So if you and I are meeting, Steve, of course, I'm going to check your LinkedIn, see who mutually we may know, what organizations, where you went to college. But I find that some attorneys and people in general are like, oh, wait, I don't want Steve to know that I checked him out before I met with him. Look, Steve will appreciate that you did your homework before you came. And then find out what they do, where they've been, a little bit about their organization, and maybe who you mutually have in common. But definitely do your homework. But again, I encourage them to build an entourage, a center of influence of those that are trusted advisors for owners and obviously business owners themselves.
Yeah. And I love everything you just said, that the importance of research and preparation and planning. And then also maybe do things that you enjoy. I mean, meet with people that are at your church or your temple, meet with people that you play a sport with, or that you can take out golfing with you. Like if you can find things that you enjoy and just learn about people and what their job is, and oh, this is a CPA and the CPA works with, 50 manufacturers around the area, and you would love to meet manufacturers, I mean, that relationship could really pan out. The other would be that you meet a CPA who doesn't know anyone and never will. Well, then maybe that's somebody that you can play golf with, but there probably isn't a next step other than maybe meeting someone else at their firm that does actually know people or work with companies and have relationships. So that would be another thing, is just try to do things like I play I play pickle and I play paddle and I play golf and I play these sports, but I'm always out meeting new people doing that.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. And I think it's important then for the initial meeting, again, you find some mutual interest
Hmm.
and maybe go out and do that. But sometimes you may start with just a phone call or a Zoom and then get to know the person a little further and then schedule a face-to-face. You know, the other thing I always encourage our attorneys to do is if, again, you're meeting with somebody that you've already met with, but you want to stay in touch with them, the next time you meet, encourage them to bring one or two other people. So you're building your network with somebody you feel comfortable with. And then again, you're almost killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah, I love that. I want to talk about some networking do's and don'ts. And again, not to go negative for the beginning, but there are some things that you just shouldn't do when you're networking at an event or when you're networking one-on-one. Why don't we go back and forth and let's just share a few of the don'ts, things that just you really shouldn't do.
Yeah, great question. Years ago, when I worked at Anheuser-Busch, my job at night was to go out and buy people beer
I'm
and work the
shocked.
bar. And work the bar, and they'd give
Yeah,
me sometimes up to $200 to introduce a new product. But now, to really build a relationship, you want to strive when you walk into, especially in a bigger networking group, to really not work the room, but to at least try to. I always say most people can only remember three things, so you have three goals, and it may be to meet three people and build a little stronger relationship with those three, either at your table or at the networking event. So I would say one thing I always encourage is even if you're going to a big networking event, don't feel the obligation to have to work the room. Really try to build two or three good relationships. And typically there's tables at those events. And so what we all make the mistake of doing is we wait until right before the presentation starts and we sit down at the table. I always encourage people, get to the table a little early, get to know those people at the table, even if you're not sitting down, so that you can take advantage of that. So you're not during the presentation yelling across the table, hey, Steve, nice to meet you. What do you do? So first and foremost, I always tell people, go a little early, go to the table early. Again, don't work the room, try to build some strong relationships. And
yeah,
then I think what you and I talked about a little earlier is uh, get people to talk about what they care about. Get them talking about their personal life. Where did they go to Cardinals? When did they go to the game? How many kids do they have? What did they do for vacation? Instead of just talking about your services and about you.
yeah. So the two don'ts that you just shared, one is don't work the room, find a couple of people and really focus on getting to know a few people well versus trying to meet everybody in one shot. And then the second one is it sounds like you want to ask questions and listen to people, let them do the talking. So don't be talking over everybody, and really focus on listening and understanding and hearing them and getting them to talk. Is that those are the two don'ts?
Exactly. And then the other one I would really emphasize, I always encourage our attorneys to bring business cards. In this digital world, you think you don't need a business card, but somebody at some point or another will ask you for a business card. But what I encourage them not to do is the minute you sit at a table or you meet somebody, you bring out that business card.
No, right.
First, get to know them, ask them their name, and then exchange business cards.
Yeah.
Uh, the worst thing I see on a regular basis is as soon as I sit down at a table, I feel like some people are playing poker. They're just handing out the
Yeah,
cards right
they're
away.
dealing them out.
They're dealing them out. And
Yeah.
so I really encourage people first. I'm usually the last one to bring out my business card at a table because I want to first get to know the people and then they'll feel comfortable that I'm giving the card because we just talked. So I think that's important.
Yeah.
The other thing I know is, especially for attorneys and CPAs as well, but people in general, is when you're at a networking event, and again, you want to build relationships with at least two or three people. Steve, you and I may run into each other at an event. We know each other. How do you politely get out of the conversation and be sincere about it? Instead of saying, I got to go to the bathroom, I got to get a drink, and then you look over and I'm not getting a drink and I'm not going to the bathroom. So I always give people tips and tools on how to get out of a conversation and I tell them, just be honest. Say, hey, Steve, you and I, we can always catch up later. I want you to take advantage of this networking event. go ahead and start, move on. Or Steve, can I introduce you to somebody over here that I don't think you've met? Then you introduce them to somebody, and then at some point you let them take the conversation, run with it.
Yeah, doing a little handoff there, but I think it's to be honest and say, I promised myself when I came here today that I was going to meet at least three people, and I've enjoyed speaking with you. I want to make sure I make good on my promise to myself. But really nice meeting with you, and thank you for taking the time, and we'll talk later. Let's keep in touch or something and move on. Um, the thing that I'm so let's move on to the things that we do want to do and that do work. And one that I'm going to give everybody real quick that I find to be so powerful is find someone at this event if you're new that's been there a while. They're either running it or they've been there for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever the case is, they know everybody. And build that relationship and let them know I'm looking to meet CPAs, I'm looking to meet lawyers in this area, whatever it might be. Would you be open to walking me around, introducing me to a few of those people? They may offer, but if they don't, would you mind just introducing me one or two of those people, because that would really make be great for me, and I'd so appreciate it. And they think you're great at this point because you spent 15 minutes talking to them, and then they walk you around the room and introduce you to the best people. Like, that's a great use of your time in an event, and you're not going to feel alone or feel like you got to wander around and like look people and I don't want to talk to them, I don't want to talk to them. And there's that empty feeling you can have when in a large room with holding a drink and not knowing who to talk to.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's a valid point. I just did this last night. I was at an Association of Corporate Growth event, and an individual I knew who he felt a little uncomfortable. He said, "Do you mind if I tag along with you?" And it was perfect for not only for him but for me as well, because I'd enjoy introducing him. The other thing I tell people, sometimes you walk into these networking meetings, and I tell our lawyers, even probably Steve and you and I, once in a while, you're just not into it. You look around, you don't really know anybody. So I always encourage people to do a couple things. One, if you see somebody else standing by themselves, walk over there. They're there because they want to meet people and talk about building a relationship. They're going to remember that forever.
Yeah.
Two is usually when you go to these big networking events, the people sitting at the table early on are there usually for the presentation. They may be the business owners. The ones that are trying to sell may be in the back. So sit down. You don't have to, again, work the room. You can go sit down. Those people that are sitting by themselves or one or two people will appreciate that. So if just like me, I'm an extrovert. Networking comes easy, but some days I'm just not into it, or I don't see anybody I know. So then I'll go sit down at a table. It's a lot more comfortable for all of us.
Yeah. So let's move on to how do we actually get business from networking, because it can be a tremendous time suck. I mean, number one, if you're not properly trained or you haven't read or listened or been coached in how to do it effectively, and you'll make mistakes and you'll figure it out eventually, but it just takes time. Ultimately, lawyers are frustrated with it because they're not getting business. They're professional meters, or they're just sick of going out and doing it because it's not leading to anything substantial. So we want to talk about how they actually leverage it to get business. And I've got a very simple formula that I want to share, an idea I want to share, but I want to get your take first, Chris, before I chime in. So what would you say is the key to getting business in networking, from
I think
networking?
at some point you make an ask. And so the ask isn't always asking for business. It may be what you said. Do you know some people here that I should be introduced to? It may be, if you're in my shoes, what other events you would be going to,
Mhm.
networking events like this. So again, it's making the ask. We all fail sometimes to forget. We get into a conversation with an individual at a networking event and we forget to ask, hey, there are other events like this. It seems like you come to this event a lot that I should go to. Other people, to your point, Steve, that I should meet here. Or, are there, if you were in my shoes, knowing what I do now, who would you suggest I meet with? What company should I be targeting? What events should I be going to? But I'd say, secondly, is be clear on what your needs are. Not everybody wants to meet everybody. So I have some people that introduce me to everybody. And for me, that's okay. But for most people, they have a targeted
Yeah.
list of who they want to be referred to and who they potentially can get referrals from. So I always make sure that instead of just introducing everybody to everybody, give me a sense of who would be the best referrals or somebody you'd like to meet.
And the discomfort with making an ask can sometimes happen when you haven't made an offer. So if I know that that you're interested in CPAs and we're talking and we're building a relationship and I go, I've got a really strong CPA, very business development, client centric, that you should meet. The likelihood that you're going to turn around and say, I'd so appreciate that, Steve. And who can I introduce you to? It's so natural then for them to want to reciprocate, for you to want to reciprocate, then I just have to be a good coach in explaining who I want to meet or asking you, to your point, to help me with that process. But that's sort of like, that's why giving, that goes back to the beginning of this podcast, right? That's why giving is so important. Developing a network isn't just about business, it's developing relationships with a lot of different people so that you can move around the pieces on the chessboard in an orderly fashion. Because if you don't know anyone, it makes it very hard to be a giver. I don't know anybody, but in fact, I'll tell you something funny, Chris. When I started networking at the Northbrook Chamber in the Chicagoland area, when I first opened my business, by the way, 20 years ago, coming up in October, um, I was just buying stuff from people. I didn't have anything to give. So I was like, oh, you do insurance? I need insurance. You're selling pens and tchotchkes. I probably could use some of those. I was just spending a fortune trying to buy because I didn't know. I had nothing else to offer at the time. And then as soon as I started building my network and I could start putting pieces together to connect other people, that all changed. But
Well,
that's, crazy.
yeah, that you bring up a good point. I'll never forget when I started in this position, Steve, probably 7 years ago. I was at a networking event, and somebody that owned a big marketing firm here in St. Louis said, "Hey, you should swing by and see my firm." So I went and met with the owner, got a tour of his firm, and we're sitting down talking, and I was ready to leave because I knew he was a busy person. And he said, wait a minute, wait a minute. He goes, "One of the reasons I wanted to see you is my attorney that I've been using is retiring and I need a new attorney. So shame on me. I forgot to do the ask, you
Whoops.
know? And so I think it's important after you get again entrenched in having a conversation and you forget to make that ask. And again,
Yeah.
if you don't feel comfortable in asking, hey, do you have an attorney? It may be again anybody else you suggest like you that's helpful that could help me build my network.
Yeah.
I think too is when it's really important that when you get back from that networking event, it could be a one-on-one or a big group networking event, and you say to an individual, Steve, you and I, we need to touch base again. We need to stay connected. And sure, you go back to your desk and you may, for most people, they'll link in and say, looking forward to staying in touch, and that's it. But I think it's important that you also have a plan to stay in touch on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And so I tell everybody, especially I had one attorney says, Chris, he was one of our partners, how do you stay organized? How do you keep up with these connections? And I said, well, what's the one thing you look at every day? And he said, well, my calendar, my online calendar. So use that as a bring up system. So if I meet you, Steve, at an event and I want to stay connected, 3 or 4 months from now, I put a little teaser on a reminder on my calendar, contact Steve. And when I reconnect with Steve, it's not necessarily another meeting. And maybe, hey, Steve, there's this Missouri Growth Association event coming up in a month. It's probably one of the best networking events. Here, I'm sending you an invitation. You might be interested in going. Or I make an introduction. Or I say, hey, let's go out and play golf. Last
Yeah.
time we just Zoomed. So I think it's important to stay connected. And I see attorneys, but people in general, that seems to be the hardest part is how do I stay connected, continue to build that relationship so that it does turn into business.
Well, yeah, and so the follow-up is so critical. Maybe not with everybody. So let me just say, if you meet someone that you consider an A player, could do business with you, could refer you a ton of business, maybe on the back of their card when you walk away, you write the letter A. So that's an A player. That's someone I need to meet with again soon and invite them to play golf. I need to do something. The B might be that middle of the road, need to continue to meet them and figure out if there's a good fit. And then C's are kind of see you later and just don't worry about it. Put them in your connect on LinkedIn and forget about them because you've done enough to know that there isn't going to be anything there that's really worthwhile, or they just try to sell you, or there wasn't a connectivity. They're a sales rep for insurance that is going to be at a new job in a year or whatever. The other thing I want to share is, and I think this is in my networking handbook, Chris, the idea of thinking about yourself like a scout for a professional team. All right. You're out in the field searching around for new business and new strategic partners. And not everybody should be moved up to your professional team. So if I'm a recruiter, a scout for the Cubs, I don't take someone off the field in Deerfield, Illinois, and throw them, into the pros to play for the Cubs. You have to bring them up slowly and test them out as you go. So the idea would be that you bring them up to the just to test them out, maybe bring them up to the minors, see how they play ball. But if you've got someone that is a CPA, just as an example, and they're giving right away. They want to build a relationship with you mutually, and they produce something of value for you. You meet again, they do it again, they get it, and you keep moving them up. Now they're on your starting lineup over time. And this is someone that could give you 5, 6, 7 leads, a new piece of business a year. That's someone you're going to want to keep on your starting lineup. And by the way, you have to add value for as well. And there's other people that are going to commit to things and fail and just not follow through. Those are people maybe you want to send down. So the idea, and at one point, Chris, just to share, I don't do this anymore, but I had a cork board on my wall, and it had business cards of 10 people. These are the 10 starting lineup, the financial planner, the CPA, the lawyer, all the people that could, refer me and work with me because they worked with the entrepreneurs at the time I was working with. Um, and when somebody failed and they just like weren't following up, they weren't responding to email, like I remember like ceremonially like pulling their card off the corkboard and then replacing that open spot with someone new. And it was just like that was such a great mindset for understanding that there's 10 people you're going to have to spend a lot of time with. There's probably 20 people you're going to have to spend some time with. And then everybody else, maybe just keep in touch with on LinkedIn or newsletter or something like that. So anyway, I just
Yeah.
wanted to put that out there as a way for people to think about recruiting for strategic relationships and partnerships, because those are the people you want to spend most of your time with eventually. And then you don't have to spend hundreds of hours a year meeting new people all the time.
You bring up a great point about A, B, or C. I just this week I was at an event and a woman I met from Bank of America, she gave me her card and she also wrote on the card where we met and what
Hmm.
our mutual connection was.
Yeah.
So I said, what a great idea. So that now I have that card and it's just not a name with a card. I'll remember that we have a mutual connection and where we met. So I like that. But one of the key takeaways has always been for our attorneys and for me from your handbook, Steve, is the elevator speech. It's so important. So when you meet somebody, it's not just, hi, how's it going? What do you do? Oh, I'm an attorney. I'm in our litigation group. I constantly refer our attorneys to some of those talking points that help people have a really stronger opening statement.
Yeah. Just something that draws them in further to ask questions or see you differently than the dozen of other attorneys that they met that night. Um, so we're going to wrap up on that point, Chris. Amazing stuff. I mean, folks, so many takeaways between Chris and I that'll help you get further in networking than you currently are. Let's talk about your game-changing podcast. I think this is a good one.
Yeah, really, on a regular basis, and I'm just not saying it, but you're because you're on the phone, especially because you're a Cubs fan and I'm a Cardinals fan, and Cardinals aren't doing so well. On a regular basis, listen to your podcast and also look at your emails and refer back to your guide because I'm again only into this for 7 or 8 years, and so you bring definitely a different perspective. You work with a lot more attorneys than I do. And so I really appreciate your podcast and some of the guests you have give a different perspective from where I'm coming from, and definitely coming from different parts of the country, different types of legal services. So that continues to help me grow professionally, but also be able to provide more benefits to our attorneys.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm very grateful for that commentary, and I just loved having you on the show, and I loved having this back and forth to share our wisdom on networking best practices for all of you listening. Want to wrap up thanking our sponsors, of course, Rankings.io, getting you found on Google and all the search channels. And of course, the Rainmakers Roundtable, everybody. This is an opportunity for rainmakers and managing partner rainmakers to collaborate with other very high functioning, growth minded attorneys in a confidential environment. If that's your thing, or if you're working for a rainmaker and you want to introduce me, I'd love to meet with that individual to talk about the value of being in a peer advisor group, solving problems and providing solutions to one another. The answers are there. It's just a matter of getting off your island and participating in a group. Chris, if people want to get in touch with you, they want to either learn more about you, they want to do business with you, network with you, what are the best digits?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Chris Ruzicka, St. Louis, Missouri, at Carmody McDonald, LinkedIn. I would also say my number is 314-854-8630, 314-854-8630, or you can find me on our website, carmodymcdonald.com in St. Louis, Missouri.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you as a friend. I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your wisdom. And let's keep it rolling, moving forward. Okay.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. And thank you everybody for spending time with Chris and I today on the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast, helping you to be confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker. Take care, everybody. Be safe, be well. We'll talk again soon.